Hello, everybody. This is Sara Kolata, and I'm an architect and an organizer of the Disrupt Symposium, which is a 5-day virtual event dedicated to the topic of business of architecture. The first edition of Disrupt will take place on the 1st to the 5th of May at 7 p.m. Central European Time, and will welcome to stage C-level leaders, partners, directors, and founders of practices such as UNStudio, SOM, BIG, Oma Amo, Soneta, Safdie Architects, Zaha Hadid Architects, Gensler, Perkins and Will, Wood Bagot, Arab, to name just a few. The event is sponsored by Graphisoft, Chaos, Tunark, Z by HP, Teradisi, and the IE School of Architecture and Design. To check this full speaker lineup and purchase your tickets, go to disruptsymposium.com. Early bird tickets are now available at 50% discount. The offer runs until 1st of April. Today we gathered for a 1-hour roundtable discussion dedicated to the topic of how to win work, focusing on business development and client acquisition efforts in architecture. To keep the conversation lively, relatable, and diverse, I invited Filippo Lodi, Associate Director at UNStudio, whose role evolves around many operational and design tasks within one of the most innovative architecture firms in Europe today. His work focuses on growth and unique value proposition development to studios' clients. Then we have Simone de Gale, who is an owner of a smaller boutique-style practice in one of the most exclusive parts of London, Belgravia, called Simone de Gale Architects. Simone works nationally and internationally and is also an honorary treasurer and a trustee at the RIBA. Following on, we have Kathy Dixon, who is a founder and principal at Kathy Dixon Architecture, but also an author of the famous Business of Architecture book. And lastly, we welcome today Jeronimo van Schendel, a director of the MArch Business of Architecture and Design program at the IE School of Architecture and Design. In conversation, each speaker will present their unique perspective onto business development for architects topic. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
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 Hello. So let's kick this up with a question directed to Filippo. Filippo, UNStudio is a big practice that uses diverse methods for client acquisition and growth, tested and perfected over time for many expert team members in your office. What do you think lies at the core of your practice when it comes to business strategy?
Well, let's say there are many aspects that are part of that core understanding of how we work. And those are always evolving, and they really are interlaced with the nature of the studio itself. So UNStudio stands for United Network Studio. So that idea of the network is an idea of diversification, of working with different experts in the way we create a value proposition. That value proposition then is enriched through the different disciplines that we bring to the table. And I'm specifically interested in a few of them. That's what my core focus lies in within the studio, which are around strategic design, service design, experience design. So these disciplines, they kind of emerge out of thinking architecture in a kind of networked way, and they bring in itself, they bring towards the studio and towards the clients that we have a very kind of novel approach, and this creates a kind of an interesting kind of angle. The other angles that we are developing are related to technology, and that's where our sister company UNSense is bringing in a different set of skill set related to how smart cities are being developed and which technology applies to it. And so there is not one answer, but it's maybe kind of a more network, a diversified answer to your question.
Excellent. This is super interesting. And When we were talking in the past, you talked a little bit also about the service approach. Can you kind of elaborate slightly on that? Because I found it really interesting if it comes to also the relationship with clients.
Yeah, so by service design, what we mean is that in a way that we think of buildings, we understand them as not only as spatial, not only from their spatial quality, but also from the services that are in within the building themselves. So you might think of an hotel lobby, but in the hotel lobby you also have a valet parking. So the valet parking is in itself a service. So you could design what that surface is and how does it connect to the physical space. But in the same way, you could think of the technology that would be used in a specific building, such as if we think at one of the examples that I always talk about is the future of offices. So we more and more today use technology, sensorial technology, to identify how many people are working in a space and how much energy is used, how much lighting do we have. So if we could design not only the space but the technology and the services that are connected to it, then we can easily identify sort of a kind of a new approach to how we can create value for it, and that's what we encapsulate under the world of service, of a service approach, or an experience design approach. These are the kind of two names that resonate, and yeah, we find that totally fascinating, and yeah, also allowing us to talk more about users at the end. So the users are the kind of new center focus of design, and these users become yeah, the real kind of injection of informations and value towards yeah, the spaces that we create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that what's really fascinating in this is that in some way you kind of, because of creating these spaces and those services, you almost create new business models and new business opportunities for the clients, and therefore acting in with different hats, not just as an architect that creates the envelope, but also almost yeah, in some respect also providing different opportunities for the client to potentially make income from within that building.
Yeah, totally. I think that's also the expertise that we have been developing in the last year by bringing in different expertise into our team. We have creative strategists and futurists, and so people with a different background that are part of that network, that united network idea, and that what increases in itself our own knowledge, and it also makes it very fun as you talk with people with different knowledges and different backgrounds, and you somehow give for granted a lot of things that sometimes are not for granted. As architects, you always stumble on yeah, well, I thought I knew that, but actually I don't. So it allows us for learning, and it makes the climate in the team very, yeah, very energetic, because you always never know enough. So that's from a learning point of view and a kind of knowledge development. Yeah, that's absolutely rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Would it be fair to say that also all these possibilities generate quite a diverse income source for the practice?
Yeah, I think so. So the kind of the kind of business models of service design versus an architectural design might be different, as usually they are part of different worlds. So that diversification allows for also diversify how the income streams are coming in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Does anyone want to add something to this before we move to another question? Yes, please, Jeronimo.
Well, I think it's very interesting, actually. UNStudio is an office I admire a lot. And I was kind of, this is a question and a proposal, but at the same time, what you mentioned about creating a value proposition for your clients in a way puts you in a very proactive situation, if you want. Like, for instance, instead of getting a sort of brief that is pre-cooked or done already by the client, I guess you involved to quite a large extent in the creation of that brief, of the need, the service, the strategic vision of that building, right? I think that's very interesting because it somehow, in my opinion, it relates a lot with the type of role that we're going to see the architect going into in the next, say, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
think that's very well said, Simone.
I mean, I totally agree. I think that the idea of being able to connect, to the use of these buildings in a much more robust way is fantastic. And what it means is that we're able to deliver a better quality product at the end of that architecture service, because we've considered this use, to such an extent that we can have all of our electricity laid out correctly, right from the inception. We're thinking about what machinery we might need, and the function of that, and then we're also being able to probably make some cost savings for the client, because we've considered these right at the start. There's not necessarily going to have to be a redesigning process, or sort of closing off the package, handing it to another designer, and then they might take a reinterpretation of that plan and then change it so that it can fit this purpose. So I think it's great, for us to really reach out and to pull that element into our businesses.
Absolutely. Simone, once we talking with you already, I wanted to ask you directly a question. Obviously, in this panel you represent, and also at Disrupt Symposium, you represent a smaller practice that's been growing successfully over the last few years. And therefore, I'm very curious to know a little bit more about your approach to business development. Where do you invest your focus as a smaller practice owner?
Thanks, Sara. I think, right from the start of my business, I was really clear on the strategy. So I set up 4 departments: architecture, master planning, interior design, and innovation. And what I did is, in the first couple of years, is actively really focus on getting projects in each one of those departments so that we could use it as experience to get more work. And for me, to be able to design, it's quite similar to the sort of service approach, but for me to be able to design, the sort of the architecture, the master planning, and the interiors, this is really, really good in terms of extending the service that we provide to the clients. And so very often we might go into a particular opportunity, into a contract, which is shaped, potentially for the architectural, the shell and core, and then, but because we have this interior design department, and we also have master planning experience, we can then quite easily bolt on these services to the client, to the project, once we've been working with the client, once we've got a good working relationship and we want to continue to building with that client. So it means that, we're able to, in effect, win 3 contracts out of that one. And that's always been the approach for my business, that we want to deliver to our clients the highest standard, but then want to absorb as much of the contract as possible until construction, until completion, because again, we're being able to carry through that golden thread of standard and also implement our design the way that we intended it to. So not necessarily having to sort of hand over to other organizations to manage even the construction elements. I'm really interested in having all of the contractors or as much of the contractors possible, so that we can ensure that that design quality is right there from the start to the end. And so there's one of the strategies that we use, having this again, diversification of portfolio in terms of architecture, master planning, interior design, and innovation. In innovation, these are things like, research and development, design concepts, patented materials, and then maybe bespoke elements like furniture and fittings and things which we can design and have built. So it's, again, we're really covered on that element of being able to own as much of the contract as possible. And then from another perspective, we invest probably about 5 or 10% of the time in the business to competitions and international competitions, particularly. And what I really like about being able to do that, because we're based in London, we're based in Belgravia, and obviously it's an amazing place to be. But for a young architectural practice, it's quite difficult to get the sort of larger scale projects. There's a lot of competition. So to be able to go abroad, which is what we did, and then work in places like Georgia, where we've got contracts, like Croatia, we've been, right from the start, being able to get larger scale projects. So for instance, in Georgia, we have this huge master plan project, which is extending the city of Tbilisi, the capital. And this was for like 3,000 homes, retail center, commercial, and public spaces as well. And a contract like that, we would not have been able to get that in London, or maybe even any other city centre in the UK at this early sort of business, small business entrepreneur stage. But being able to go abroad and sort of utilize our branding, obviously the association with RIBA and with ARB. These are, standards which are really respected across the world, and we've been able to win larger scale projects. And so what I think in that regard is that very early we're getting the experience of designing and managing that sort of scale of project, which we can bring back to the UK or bring back to London, and then we can compete potentially with some of the medium-sized businesses, and I don't know, with the great big businesses, if we could compete with those at this stage. But it's just given us some leverage, and it's given us an opportunity to win more projects abroad. The project we won in Croatia is on the back of our reputation developing in Georgia, and us having lots of coverage in their press, etc. And then also we've been having discussions in Ukraine to do some development there, and I've spoken at a couple of conferences in Ukraine, which was wonderful, because again they reached out to me, and they found, I'm not quite sure how they found, our reputation, but it was spreading across that part of the world. And so this is what I think is really, really fun and interesting. And what it also means is that, again, you're sort of lowering the risk of business failure, because what we're able to do is get contracts in other countries, and where there might be changes or challenges in maybe the UK market, we can look at our projects internationally, and then we can use that profile to work in other countries as well. So I think that having that really, really sort of focus on having a safe, risk-adverse portfolio, that is the key to business survival and to growing from a small organization to a larger one. And I think as well, very early on, I realized that quite a lot of the startup architects are maybe quite interested in giving away a lot of work for nothing. And I think for me, it's always been really, really tested, because, you know, I love the mind of an architect. You know, it's so valuable, and the way that the sort of outlook in the world, you can interpret the environment in so many different ways if you're with that education. And these are the skills and the advice and the professionalism that we're providing to our clients. And so, you know, I think that what I've always done is been a champion for us protecting our ideas, protecting our advisory, and ensuring that we are always charging for our any sort of work that we do, whether that be sketching or a consultation meeting or feasibility, you know, ensuring that everything is quite robust, so that when we're delivering to the client, you know, they're paying for that service, and ultimately the client will really hold that piece of work in high regard, because, you know, they paid for it. And so I'm always championing, you know, us architects to sort of respect our value. And I know we've spoken on this quite a few times, Sarah, you know, the value of the architect. And this is because, you know, we have to retain the value. If only one or a few of us are doing that, it's going to be really difficult for us to operate on a level playing field, you know, cutting fees and things like that. And then ultimately you get some, you know, tragedies, like even the Grenfell tragedy, which occurred a few years ago. So understanding how valuable our work is and our advice is something that I'm a strong champion on. And I think that it is more interesting for us as architects to maybe compete on the skills, you know, on the service delivery, as opposed to competing on fees. So this is the approach that I've taken, and it's worked really well. And you know, the company grows through reinvested profit. So, you know, in terms of financials, were sound as well.
Mm-hmm. And just wanted to ask about that aspect of the exact approach as to how you divide, let's just say, the big project into smaller pieces and price it, because I know that that's something you do. We've talked about this in the past, and I think that it's important to sort of mention that process, because a lot of people perhaps don't understand that you can put a price tag on almost every single part of the project delivery, whether it's just a grown-up plan or a tender package and so on.
I think that, you know, architecture and construction is so big. You know, when you're doing a project, there's so much that goes into it, and from the client's perspective, they're investing, you know, a lot. And so it's very easy for myself to see a project and understand what the requirement is in terms of the architectural delivery, what the client will need. But you know, seeing those figures can sometimes make a client a bit skeptical if you present it all at once, especially if it's a client that you've never worked with before. It might be a new client to you. So what I found is a really good way of closing business is to break the contract down, you know, in its stages. And we already have the RIBA guidance, you know, the sort of plan of work 0 to 7, which is a great starting point. And to be able to break it down, especially to a new client, you know, instead of proposing that we complete the whole of the contract, we might say, oh, you know, initially, let's look at stage 0, and we can charge that by per hour or per day. Let's look at stage 1, and we can do like a lump sum figure for that. And what that does, it breaks the contract down to such a good sort of different phases that the client can start to digest the responsibility and the requirement and the fees which you're proposing. So, you know, instead of proposing the full 0 to 7 fee, you might propose the 0 to 1 fee. And so that gives the client an opportunity, and it gives you, the architect, or us as the architect, to speak to the client and to work on that first stage, you know, stage 0, stage 1, and sort of build up that relationship, how you're going to be working together, how you're going to be communicating, how you're going to be delivering the service. Do they get their drawings on time? How have you given them lots of options? Are these feasible options? And it really gives that, it's like building that relationship with the client so that you get that sort of trusted advisor position where they really trust what your advice and what you're saying. And what it does, one, it's very easy to then move on to stage 2 and stage 3. And so what that means is that you've not given any work away. You've just broken it down into digestible chunks which the client can absorb and are happy to sort of pay for. And then in fact you might end up with a larger contract or with a larger fee, just being able to break it down like that. And you're delivering to the highest standard, and also you're building up that trust. You're maintaining that sort of element of trying to be ambitious and trying to sort of win the next part of the contract, and I find that really, really useful, because even when we're not expecting it, because we've delivered a good service, the client will then ask us to provide another service, ask us to look at another project, ask us to, or recommend us to some of their colleagues. And that's what I think is really wonderful, because you're starting to have this really smooth journey, and where you're delivering and you're designing in a good environment and not too pressurized, where the quality is decimated. You're working at a good pace, and you're sort of keen to win that next part of the contract. So you really want to impress your client, and that's a really, really useful tool for us.
Thank you, Simone. This is really great because it gives us a bit of an understanding of how you operate from a smaller practice perspective. And the next question I wanted to direct to Kathy. Kathy, you wrote an excellent book on business of architecture, and it covers a lot of different topics on business, but one of those is client acquisition. Would you share with us some insights from your experience and advice on how to win work?
Sure, Sarah, thank you. There's just so much to unpack when we're talking about how to win work and finding clients. I'll try and touch on a few things, basic, and then maybe some deeper level, take some of my own advice from the book. I'll talk about what we've done. But I mean, at the very basic level, social media and your branding and marketing is number one. You have to determine what your niche is going to be as your firm, what type of projects you're going to be pursuing, what's going to differentiate you from other firms, and then you promote it through website. Maybe speaking engagements like this. We do a monthly newsletter that goes out to clients and other firms and colleagues. That keeps us top of mind. Every month they're hearing from us, so they know that we're there to help whenever needed. You can also go where the clients are, join industry organizations, and be involved in the community. All these things lead to finding clients, finding good clients. You can also write articles, blog, and do these types of things online to help get your name out there, get the firm's name out there, and stay in front of clients. Sometimes, it's going to take a while to find the clients. You have to really do some long-term, it's a long game, long-term research and sort of courting of clients. We've had clients, we've gone to their industry day sort of events and met with them, and took years to get onto their sort of preferred vendor list. And then after getting on the list, it's still a challenge to get the work. So it's not a simple thing to do for some types of clients, especially federal government type clients. But you have to put in the work, and then over time, it will begin to, I think, realize itself. That's how we've been working with some of our local county government clients, because we've shown the value that the previous speakers have talked about, the value that the architect can bring, and how we can save them money over time by helping them with not only this particular building design, but their overall portfolio. So you really have to show the client, understand the client, how they procure work, what they need to achieve, and then show them how you can help them to achieve it. That's one of the biggest values I think that our firms can do. Also, if you I think target which types of clients that you want to go after, whether it is federal, local, private clients. You have to understand what their procurement system is, and then work with that system, work within that system to show that you can provide them the services that they need, and show them maybe what they are not thinking about, how that value that yes, they want this RFP, but what are they missing? Just like Simone was saying, there's so much else that we can provide, and if you can show that to the client, then they are going to, bring you on, and then keep bringing you on your continual referral projects. So I think those are some of the, I'd say, most basic strategies to getting clients. Also, profit centers, I think that's been mentioned as well. What types of projects are you going after with disciplines, architecture, interiors, planning? We're starting to get into a lot of program and program management, CM, phase management, just owner's rep type of work, because we see that there are clients out there that need that. I'll call it hand-holding more than others. So knowing that there are clients like that helps you to sort of target your marketing and go after those particular agencies that need that help. So I've touched on quite a few things. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Sarah, hopefully.
You're on mute, Sara. Oh.
Sorry. No, it's really interesting for me from the perspective also when we speak about the different efforts, because on one hand, we have to understand that in order to obtain new work, it's about managing reputation, it's about providing high value for the clients, but also actually opening up to marketing, to look into internal business structures as well, and to answer the question of whether or not I have a strategy and a focus as to where I want to go, what sort of clients I want to actually serve. And so perhaps the least popular way to look at it within the architecture industry is to actually look into marketing. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, you mentioned already list building, and sort of that's a very digital marketing approach. Would you sort of tell us a little bit more as to how you do that within your practice? What sort of efforts you invest in from a perspective of marketing to get clients?
Right. The newsletter that I mentioned, that's sort of a business development and marketing effort. A lot of our, I guess, projects are referrals. We've done some good work and we get repeat clients. That's always a good thing. And we actually market ourselves to other firms, especially larger firms, because we do sub-consult on some very large projects, things that we couldn't pursue on our own by ourselves, but we can JV. It's a very lucrative way of winning larger projects and winning work. So we market ourselves to other architecture firms, and even my team with specialty consultants on some projects. For example, we went after a sort of forensic science laboratory type project, and brought on a national lab design specialist under us. We were the prime. So being able to prove ourselves in that manner will help us in the future when we're teaming with other very large partners, both local and national and international. So that's one marketing effort that we're doing.
And that networking, does it happen on big events, conferences?
Yes, we attend conferences, American Institute of Architects, National Organization of Minority Architects. I attend those regularly. Greenbelt and USGBC, other conferences like that. But local events as well, wherever you're situated. Certainly, there's local events that you can attend and be involved with. Industry events, for example, we do a lot of K-12 work, and the industry has local conventions that all of the school systems will attend. So architecture firms will attend, have a booth there, and get their name out there. To those officials. So that's another method that certainly is popular.
Excellent. So Jeronimo, I want to ask you now. You run the MBA ARC department at the IE School of Architecture and Design, and it focuses on preparing students for business by teaching them relevant skills. Successful cases include students that scaled up their architecture businesses or actually graduated with in-market solutions that already turned profit, which is pretty amazing. Share with us what are the fundamental, most important approaches to business development when starting your business.
Thank you for the question, Sara. And actually, I'm quite pleased with the conversation. Many of the things you all have discussed are somehow nurturing the ideas I have brought today. Quite particularly, Katie has been giving precise examples of some of the things I'm going to share now. Basically, I'm an entrepreneur myself, apart from being the director of the MBA ARC at IE. So I do know, I have a construction technology company, and before I was an architect, practicing architect as well. So I have seen, first of all, the experience of many students trying to starting actually, as Sara, you mentioned, successful companies, but as well have done it in a way myself. So I want to share 5 big areas of thought, I would say, of people for people when they are facing this very challenging journey of starting a business. So, I think that in architecture and arguably as well in construction as a whole, and many of the sub-markets it has globally, people start businesses often in a way without a little previous process, little but critical process of thinking what is the purpose for the company they are building, basically. So you think, okay, I'm going to do an architecture office, right? And my purpose of an architecture office is designing buildings. Well, that is the generic purpose. But what is the very specific purpose that your company has? What is the thing that is going to set you apart from everyone else? Not because you say it, but because you truly believe it and because that resonates with the market. I think Katie was making some related comment to that. So for us, we do a lot of incidents in what we call the problem. Really, what is the problem that your client has, or that your target client has, or the world out there represented in a large segment of society has, that you, through the services or products or a combination of those in a company, can solve, right? Because in the end, companies through services or products are here to solve problems. That is, one of the key things. So the ideas I brought now, I'm going to bring now, are both connected, in a way to the business development directly, but also to the value creation component of every business. So the first thing is that business development is a key aspect of practice's life, of any company's life. It's one of the key things you have to do, quite importantly, or even more if you are within a services company like we are, in which people are selecting you to provide one of the most important services in their, so a service related to one of the most important investments they will do, regardless of whether or not whether they are a company or a person or a family, right? And you don't sell architecture projects in a store or only on Instagram posts, or putting ads on TV or in the city. That sounds obvious, but it has a lot of implications on how you do things in the end. That requires time, and I'm going to go into that in a moment. But one of the first immediate things that many people don't seem to realize when we deal with that at the very beginning is that you have to be. It has to be led by, with the redundancy, a leadership person in a company. Either the CEO or someone that is taking that leadership, that has the inside his own body, breaths the company mission, and is able to relate very quickly all the sort of actions that are related to business development. Many people seem to think that this is something you leave for your intern to put up a few posts on LinkedIn or Instagram, and that is fine for brand presence, but that is not what really ends up leading to a job, to landing a job, particularly on the private market. So I wanted to bring this, if you want, parallelism. It's as a sort of intro. It's like business development for me is like cooking, right? You can have grandma's awesome cake recipe, and it's always going to be simple when you see it written. But oh dear, if you try it yourself, you'll never do it as well. It will never be as good as your grandma's cake or your grandpa's cake, right? And there are very simple ingredients, but they need to be very well understood and balanced. And what people think sometimes is that it's about complexity, but it's often about synthesis and balance. And Katie said it, perseverance in what you do. Business development is a strategy and a job. That's my second point as a result of the cooking reference. You remember probably this phrase when people is finding a job, that you have to do the job of finding a job. Well, business development is exactly like that. It's not only about doing lots of competitions. Of course, that is part of your strategy, or it could be part of your strategy. But that's a market or a sub-market in which the success rate at its best is around 20%. So you really need to think about a holistic strategy that includes many ingredients, and persevere in that, and make sure that you keep with that strategy for some time until you get your cake cooked, right? That's pretty important. Another thing that I think Simone was speaking about, very interesting, is associations. Associations, for instance, many people often think, okay, let's partner with this other company because they're nice to work with, or let's partner with this institution for why. But there is really an ecosystem vision here. You have to be able to think about partnering in a complementary way with collaborators, with facilitators, with communicators, such as this event, for instance, with Arc Daily, right? And with clients and corporations in the end. But you need to do an exercise of self-awareness about what you can bring to the table and what are your weak points, and how you can find those strengths in someone else or another organization in order to make a stronger business case. That is super important. And then another one that seems very obvious, but our experience tells us it's not at all, is that as in any strategic aspect, I was mentioning that business development is a strategy. As in any strategic aspect, there's not a single good or bad way to do business development. I wish there was this 10 actions that are going to make you the most successful practice in the world, but those are only the ingredients of the cake. You then need to mix them in the right amount and proportion, put the oven at the right temperature, and so on. So that takes logic and self-awareness, and it's quite hard, because self-awareness is something that it takes time and experience to build, right? I'm going to share a couple of things there about this proportion and balance. First of all, one that I find that is often broken as a machine is aligning the message that you deliver. So what you are using to deliver that business development, what you say that you're doing, or why you're saying that you're different. Your target clients, who are you telling this? Because it's pretty important. And then the type of work you do. You find a number of companies that tell you that they do this type of work, when in the end, when you see their portfolio, you see their work stands out for other things. So there's this misalignment, and then sometimes as a result of that, they're trying to find target clients that are not exactly the ones that their work really resonates with. And then there's another one that has been touched in a slightly different way, but it's doing a lot of work in fine-tuning the scope of work that you offer. I think it was Simone that was saying you try to in a way encompass more, and that's a very smart strategy in my opinion. There are others, but trying to align that scope of work with the fees level that you are offering to your market, and again to the type of clients you're trying to find and the type of architecture that you're trying to do. You find as well a lot of misalignment on both ends. One end, people doing one type of work for one type of client on a super high fee and scope of work level, and completely the contrary, being the quintessential example, work for free for any kind of organization that probably you work for free for the most powerful and renowned organization because it's going to bring you more work. But in the end, another way of thinking about that would be probably they are more willing to pay than other, less known and robust company. I'm wrapping up. So, the other thing that is key is you can do infinite business development, but if you're not solving a clear problem for your clients, if you don't have clarity about which is that clear problem in a differentiated way, your efforts will be infertile. You can pump as much money you want in the network. You can have the most beautifully coded website, but if it's not clear, that is going to bring you trouble in the long term. So think deeply about what is it that you solve for your clients that make you so necessary for them. And then where are those people that need your solution? There's the typical picture, kind of cartoonesque picture of the party or the welcoming party in an office done by architects, for architects, restricted to architects. And that's fine. It gives you reputation and it's part of the business development. But guess what? Probably people that are going to buy your services are within other circles, right? So that's very important. So it's not about necessarily you or your service itself or your projects to some extent, but it's about your client and their problems, and it's about building trust. And trust is one of the hardest things to build. And sometimes it's not about saying, look at we've done 100 projects. Of course, if you have done 100 projects, you are more entitled to be trusted to do 101. But as well, you build trust in other ways. You build trust in a social circle by meeting a person 2 or 3 times in the same circle of interest. For instance, in marketing, it's demonstrated that until people see a brand 7 times, they're not naturally inclined to trust it without a previous filter. So the 7th time you see a brand, you interiorize that it's already a known brand and you are inclined to trust it. So that gives you an idea of how our logic and our feelings work, right? And then there's a final one to wrap, which is business development is about, in a way, opportunity and fun. And you can take it as something very boring and methodical and so on, and that's part of it. But there's also an opportunistic and adventurous way there. So, for instance, to give you an example, we see, and I have consulted with companies that win a competition abroad in a new market, probably or often a market that is more powerful than their natural market. Say you are now in, for instance, in Spain, you win a competition in, I don't know, another country, the US, for instance. You go there, it's an important commission, you work for a couple of years, and you're always sort of cramped with work. So you travel there once a month, you do the job, you do the drawing, supervise, and then go back, and that's it, right? But if you have a strategy before, if you know the problem you're solving, if you know the channel you want to deliver it, and you find the social circles where you can connect, then you can save a little part of that time, which, by the way, is a super expensive time, you traveling and so on, to establish those types of bonds. And at the end of that 2 years, 3 years, depending, 5 years job, you will have probably planted the seed, or probably it will be already be a grown-up plant that will generate new jobs and new contacts on this new market, which, by the way, is one of the hardest things to do, right? Plant the seed in another market. So if you have already had that chance to win a competition or have a commission there, develop that. Don't let that just go because you're always too busy, right? And to wrap up, as a bonus, I think Katie or Simone were saying, repeat clients are the best thing you can have. And one of the things is, if you work to nurture these relationships in the long term as almost as friends, you'll end up finding that they bring new friends, as in any party, and that they also repeat. And if you look at the cost structure in a company, in an architecture or in a design services company, that is extremely efficient, right? Having a client that repeats. Okay, so that is some of the thoughts I had, which in the end, at IE, at the MBR, what we do is we try to train people who look at all of this holistically and build a plan for companies, their companies, or to grow in other companies that can be scalable and done in an approachable way. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I actually have a question from someone who's watching, Scott. He says, is there any danger or threat if you as a film make a certain commitment, let's just say to environmental topics? So I think he's asking about niching out, but still take on business as usual projects that, that toe the bottom line.
Is that for me or for anyone?
Yes, you can answer it.
Okay.
I think it relates to what you were just speaking about.
Good, absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks, Scott, for the question. I think the something that is, I wouldn't really say a danger, but the thing with, and again, allow me to come back to my metaphor of the cake, right? You put the oven to warm, and probably when you put the cake in the oven, you don't know it's going to get burnt. But if you come back 10, 20 minutes after, or 30 minutes after, it will probably have burnt. The thing with business development, and quite especially in construction and architecture, is our sales cycle and our development cycle is super long. So you don't have the feedback of the market very often. You have it very, you're not selling sneakers out there and you see if people like them or not within the blink of an eye or within a week or something. You take years. So if you do business as usual, it's fine, but you have few chances to really demonstrate that you put your money where your mouth is. And in the end, the danger is not that people is going to blame you or anything, but people is just going to trust you based on what you did. So if you don't, again, coming back to the alignment, if you say that you're going to do something and that something is not aligned with the type of client that expects you to do that something, and with the type of market that you're trying to address, then you'll probably find clients that are, not expecting what you solve and therefore will not buy you. And then you'll discover that, when it's already too late to reactivate the machine or to, turn the ship left or right, because it already has its inertia. And this is something big companies in our field, big architectural offices, they often look at this into the 6 to 9 months pipeline, direction. Like what's happening now that could affect us 6, 9, 12 months in the pipeline, because this is how our business is run, right? So yes, in a way, if you want, greenwashing or things like that could play a dangerous setback if you are trying to really differentiate because of that, because someone else might not be doing it, right? And they might be putting their money where their mouth is, and then they outcompete you, basically. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to add to that as well, because I think that's such an important point, Jeronimo. That if you want to make a commitment, you as a business, you've got to believe in it. You can't just make a commitment for the sake of it. And I think you have to think very carefully about the commitments that you want to make before you make them, because I mean, why would it be necessary to have other projects which are outside of that commitment if that's not the direction of where your business is going? I think it might be even easier to maybe not make the commitment, but then start to implement some of those features, some of those environmental features into your project, so that it's not such a pressure on yourself. It's something which you can sort of build up, and then when you're more confident that those are the types of projects that you're going to be receiving or commissioned for all of the time, then you can make the full-on commitment.
Yeah, Americans say under promise, over deliver, right?
Yeah.
That's rule of thumb.
Exactly. So, Filippo, I wanted to sort of direct this question to you, because you've been listening to all the other speakers kind of describe the efforts as they represent smaller practices, as well as coming from educational background and startup background. I'm curious to know if you have any advice to business owners in architecture. Give us like 2 or 3 points to ponder on as we wrap up this conversation.
Well, I liked a lot the kind of talk the talk and walk the walk sort of advice, meaning be true about where you actually, what you believe in and what you would like to do. As the industry is a slow industry, is not, and things stick for a time. So that I think is a kind of, yeah, a good sentence. And the other, maybe the other kind of take that I think I find fascinating in the industry is to think about what would that mean for you to disrupt the industry in itself, and that doesn't mean all of a sudden to do something else, but yeah, there is a lot to say in what disruptions means, which means to don't do things like, yeah, just like they were done before. So whatever your disruption is, if it's a small disruption or a big disruption, it doesn't matter. It's about, taking that opportunity to reinvent what you are along the way multiple times, and that always kind of brings in a new nature into the things that you do, and it also makes it more exciting, the journey. And the third advice is to just have fun, as, yeah, that's the best thing to do, right? So there's no better business than business in which you have fun. And yeah, I keep on saying that to everybody in my own team, is that, yeah, as much as possible, we just need to have fun. At the end of the day, that's the recipe where to do good business for.
Yeah, I say the same things to my team as well. As you know, that it's about having fun. You've got to enjoy the work that you're doing, especially if you're running your own business. Then you actually get to choose what you do. You get to choose, the projects. Hopefully, anyway, you get to choose the projects that you're doing, the people you're working with, where you're working, even the people that are working in your office. So you've got to make it an enjoyable experience. And I love, when our designers are immersed in the design and having fun and enjoying that process, because that's when the best work comes out.
Absolutely. Jeronimo, what is disruption to you in architecture?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I could go on the, I don't think when we speak about disrupt, we many times think about, or people think about reinventing the tire in many cases. But some of the greatest innovations come as let's say, as an add-on layer into something that was already there, right? So I think for me, I guess the most interesting disruption is, or the positive disruption is the one that comes from a solution to a problem that was in the face of the eyes of people, a terrible user experience, a terrible client experience, a sustainability issue, a construction issue that has been solved, and suddenly you look at it in a different way, and you start producing value in there. But it's not necessarily about, there's people that understand disruption as a sort of similar term to gentrification, where you so pushing out things and pumping in something else. But I think in the end, every disruptive model that works needs to be adopted by a large segment of society, and those are the ones that are really right. So the invention is this thing that is new and might be nice or not, but it's this novel thing. But innovation is when that novel thing also is adopted by that large proportion of society, and for that it needs to be something that is valuable for people, for the industry, for the economy, for the environment, whatever you deem feasible technically and economically as well, sustainable in a way, right? And that magic triangle is where I think that disruption really takes place. But I wouldn't have a one sentence of what disruption is like that.
I think that we can disrupt better the the practice of architecture, specifically from the business perspective, if we actually educate ourselves around business. And I know that you live by that mission too.
As well.
And
Yeah,
so,
totally
yeah,
agree.
therefore, this is why we're all here as well, to grow and learn from each other.
I
So
would
thank
say
you,
that.
Filippo.
Yeah, no, sorry, didn't want to. I would say, because you are also on that world, I would say that a big disruption in the culture of our industry is understanding that it's not business against design or business against architecture, but it's business and architecture are stronger together, which is our motto at IE School of Architecture and Design at the business world, right? So it's like you really need it. Every single business person that has been successful in every field, they really understood, business logics. It's not, we're not so different as we think.
Yeah, and it's not a secret. You just have to study it. It's just another knowledge to obtain, really, and then it will work if you implement it in your business.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you guys. Thank you so much, Filippo, Simone, Kathy, and Jeronimo, for this fruitful discussion. I certainly learned a lot. Thanks as well to ArcDaily for this tremendous opportunity and support with the symposium. And a big thank you to everyone that listened in. Roundtable discussions will be held in this format here every Thursday at 6 p.m. Central European Time. You have to check what time it is at your local time zone. You can save the day in your calendar and keep your eyes peeled here or on my social media for further announcements of future topics and guests. Please also go to www.disruptsymposium.com, link below if you haven't noticed, and to reserve your seats from 1st to the 5th of May. All of our panelists will be present and they will actually give their presentations in in-depth keynotes. So Filippo Lodi will speak about value-adding activities through design and services. Simone de Gale will present competitions, procurement, and bid strategies. Jeronimo van Schendel symposium topic is disrupting the built environment through business-focused architecture education. And Kathy Dixon will teach us how to run a financially savvy architecture firm. So don't forget, 50% early bird tickets are available until 1st of April. Act now, go to the website, and we'll see you all there. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks.